Okay, so welcome to our project Positivity in Conversation with. And today we're joined by someone whose face will be familiar to many BBC viewers. It's Dr. Sam Willis. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Mark.
How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. Enjoying my day.
Good. And lockdown seems to find you in your garden shed.
It does. I'm spending hours in my garden shed. When I usually work here when I'm not out and about filming. I come and I do a lot of my work here. I write my podcasts here. I write a lot of my books here. I'm right in the middle of Exeter. I've got a nice view down the garden, and I'm surrounded by a lot of my favourite things I've picked up on my travels and my adventures all over the world. So it's a lovely place to be, actually. So I'm quite enjoying lockdown.
Good. What's your favourite thing in the shed?
My favourite thing in the shed is definitely my sword at the back.
Oh, wow.
It's a cavalryman's sword. And
wow.
I have a Viking axe up here as well, which you can't see. But it was my great grandfather's, who was in the Royal Navy and then was very high up in the police, and he was given that sword. And so that's one of 4 swords I have, and my axe. I've got various weapons basically in the house, and my axe kept falling off the wall and nearly chopping my toes off. So
oh no, okay.
Dangerous place to be, this.
So don't mess with Dr. Sam is the message there, I think.
Exactly. I'll come to you.
So when lockdown happened, Sam, I think you were in the middle of a tour when you were bringing your your very popular podcast series to life.
That's right. Well, we have our podcast, Histories of the Unexpected, which had done really very well. And we worked with a local playwright, a guy called Daniel Jameson, who does a lot of plays for Theatre Alibi. If you've got young kids, you may well have seen one of Dan's plays at the Exeter Phoenix or out and about. And he turned it into a live show for myself and my fellow presenter, James Daybell, who's a professor at the University of Plymouth. And we've been doing this live show for about a year, and it had really just taken off. We'd just done 2 sold out shows at a theatre in Maidenhead in half term. We'd got the original Histories of the Unexpected live show out, and then did a new one on the Tudors, which was designed to tie in for the curriculum. So we were doing theatres and cathedrals and churches and village halls all over the place, having a wonderful time. So that stopped, which was on the one hand quite annoying, but on the other hand it's been okay because it's allowed us to concentrate on various other things.
And you've now switched to doing more online than ever before, and bringing a sort of, even more of an educational slant to what you're doing. How did that come about, and how quickly were you able to react?
Well, the Histories of the Unexpected was born as a podcast, and then that became a book, and then a series of books, and then a live show. So we kind of had that whole thing set up. And we already were catering for kids, but not sort of consciously. So we started off by doing some podcast episodes on the history of things that people were suddenly starting to think about. We did the history of hands. We did the history of loneliness, the history of boredom, the history of soap. Lots of things which have suddenly come into the public consciousness. And then my colleague, James Daybell, I think because he works in an educational institution at the University of Plymouth, said, look, we need to be doing some homeschooling stuff. And so it took us a bit of time to work out how to do it. And what we wanted to do was to take the Histories of the Unexpected basic idea, and that is that you do the history of things that people don't think have a history. So rather than doing a podcast on Henry VIII, we will do a podcast on the history of courage, for example, and that might feature something on Henry VIII. So you get to the same stories, but you do it from a different direction. So we wanted that idea of doing something unusual, but then we had to tie it into the curriculum, which did pose some problems. But once I'd worked out how to do it, it was fine. And the first one we did was the history of slime. And we did that, it was also with a titling of it. So the history of slime, homeschooling the Industrial Revolution. Because I knew that I could talk about the history of slime in relation to machines and the Industrial Revolution. Because they started inventing all of these machines, the steam engines. They were transforming businesses. They were transforming the way that things were made, that things were consumed, that things traveled all over the country. But usually people focus on how the machines worked, but I realised if you actually wrote about industrial lubricants, which is really surprisingly interesting, you get a whole new understanding of it. And kids like slime, they're interested in the slime, and they have to learn about the Industrial Revolution. So what I did was I put it all together. And since then we've done the history of show-offs, which we did, the Norman Castle building. We have done the history of breaking promises, something else kids are really into. That's all about the gunpowder plot. The history of bullies. We did that was Nazi brown shirts and the rise of Hitler. So you see how it works. We've ended up doing
and
about
zombies. As well, zombies as well. Was that right?
Yeah, zombies is an earlier one of our actual adult podcast. That's not a specific kids one, but zombies do have a fascinating history. They were basically invented by an American journalist in the 1930s.
Oh, is that right? That's right. Well, we must listen to that podcast. It's a good teaser for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
But no, you've given some really, really catchy sort of headlines to all of the podcasts, and I think really one question is to translate this into a business world. You've very quickly packaged something up, turned it into a product effectively that you're now promoting. A lot of us are now in business doing this sort of thing, using Zoom and technology we might not have used before. What lesson do you think businesses could learn from this current situation and how we're using technology, and in terms of the way that you've turned what you did as a live show into effectively a product?
I suppose the real lesson is that that you might be focused very much on one pathway because it might be leading you to a certain amount of success, or you might be repeatedly banging your head against the wall, kind of deep down knowing that it's going to work, but it may be not quite working. And it's very reassuring, I think, that if you sit down and you just think about what you're doing in a slightly different way, there are always other alleyways and pathways that you can follow. And it's sort of proof that you shouldn't get stuck in a rut. And actually, if you stop and take 2 or 3 steps backwards, you can then gain more momentum to go forward in the way that you actually wanted to go. So by not doing our live touring, I actually think it's going to make it much easier to sell tickets and to get gigs in really big theatres, because we've multiplied our listenership online by 6, I think, since we've done it. So, we're up to 120, nearly 130,000 downloads in the last 30 days. And before we were very happy with what we were getting, but just once I'd worked it out, it took a bit of an effort to work out how to do it. But once I'd worked out how to do it, and I could do something that was quite easily repeatable, then it really made sense. So I suppose it's proof that if you just stop and have a breather and a think, you can pivot, and you can do something different, but it can help with the long plan, the long term.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really good advice. And I think one of the keys for me is the democratization of this sort of thing. If we went back 10 years and somebody wanted to interview Sam Willis and broadcast it, it would be the BBC or ITV or one of the satellite channels. Now we've all got these tools available and pretty much for free.
Yeah, I would suggest one thing actually is that you've got so many different ways you can do it. You can do Facebook Live, you can do Periscope, you can do Twitter, whatever it might, Instagram. We've chosen to do podcasts. We could also be doing vodka videos, whatever. I think doing one of them brilliantly is the way ahead. That's what I'd suggest. It's very easy to waste your time, not waste your time, but to spread your time and your effort over all of these platforms. You just can't physically do it unless you've got 10 employees. If it's just you, or it's just you and a couple of other people, I'd do one thing and I'd absolutely smash it.
Yeah. And you make your content compelling. If you're, I don't know, an accountancy firm or law firm, there's certain reasons why you might not be able to be as adventurous as you guys are. Any tips for a business that might be a bit more constrained by what it does? I'd say
for a start, if you're accountancy in a law firm, you've got a great deal of really interesting clients.
Right.
And
Okay.
what you need to do to get more clients is to advertise that you have clients and that your clients are interesting and do interesting stuff. There's nothing more powerful than that. So you might be the person sitting behind the desk doing all the numbers or doing all the writing, but actually your clients are unbelievably valuable because they will help you get other clients. And so actually I think it's a complete goldmine. If you work with other people in the real world doing a variety of stuff, it's fantastic, whatever you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
And you
Is there,
actually don't need to make it relevant to what you do. You don't need to sit down and talk about necessarily the kind of what you do in the business world. It's just a matter of providing some really interesting content, because then you've got PR agencies who might become interested in you and your clients. It creates a vast amount of opportunities. And it can be, if you run a little restaurant, or you ran a little restaurant or a pub or whatever it be, you can just, all of the people you know who come to your pub are really, really interesting. And they've all got contacts, and everyone can help each other. So as long as you're not, well, actually, even an author, even someone who basically, in theory, works from their own, has an amazing network. And if you can get that network out there, whether it's by video or audio or whatever it might be, then you become valuable in your own right.
yeah, yeah. And it's the stories, isn't it, Sam? It all starts with a story. We say with our PR company, one of the first things we say when we sit down and talk to clients is, what is your story? Because, everybody's got a unique story, and people relate to stories.
Yeah. And they're absolutely interesting. And that's basically what the internet runs off. It runs off people being interesting and their stories. And you can have someone who, especially like me, if you've got me as the public face as a historian, then I do quite a straightforward pieces to camera and interviews on telly, but you never get a sense of me being me, do you? I mean,
No.
so a lot of people who are hilarious, but they have like a very straight job, and you just don't ever see that side of them. So I think it's having confidence in the value of all of the people and appreciating the value of yourself, whatever it might be. And the internet just allows you to make contact and meet people who share the things that you do. That's how it works. And it's it is such a great way of spreading any kind of word.
Excellent, thank you. I'm interested though, is there anything that we can learn from history about the current situation that we're in?
Well, yes, it's not surprising that we're in this situation. Humans get ill. They have done for generations. Ever since humans came around, we've got ill, and it hasn't got rid of us yet. So it's actually a very positive thing. So it might seem horrific. You might get really kind of beaten up by the badness of the news and the frightening nature of it all. But be reassured that we're actually very, very clever and very good at adapting and very resilient. That's what humans do better than any other species, really. With the possible exception of viruses. So I mean, it's not surprising, and we haven't had a really big pandemic since I suppose the Spanish flu of 1917, 1918, and it had to happen at some point, and I'm relieved actually it's happened now, and it has happened in this way, because it's not in any way as bad as what it could be. And I'm sitting here in a house. I've got two teenagers who live with me. They are my children. And to have it happen now with something that actually isn't too bad in relation to what's happened in history means we've got to learn a whole new load of lessons. Scientists will change the way we do things. Politicians will change the way we do things. People in economics will change the way we do things. It means we'll be so much better prepared if something really, really horrific happens, or even if something as bad as this happens again in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we'll be much better prepared. It had to happen soon, and it has happened, and I'm very glad it has now and in this way. I know that sounds like a tough way to put it, but you can't pretend it wasn't going to happen. So once you accept that, then it's got to happen at some point, and I'm delighted it hasn't been Ebola or something.
Yeah, exactly. What's the biggest lesson you've learned personally, Sam, through this?
That my parents are going to move down here. They both had it, and have survived, but they were very, very ill, and yeah, I think keep your family close.
Excellent. Sam, been great talking to you. If people want to listen to your podcast, where do they go? Get the plug in now.
Yeah, go and check out historiesoftheunexpected.com, or just search up Histories of the Unexpected anywhere you get your podcasts. There's a whole range of really, really interesting stuff. And do get in touch with us on social media. We'd love to hear from every single one of you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Sam, thanks for your time. Really enjoyed the chat, and hopefully we'll touch base with you in a few weeks' time and see how you're getting on.
Great stuff. Right, thanks, Mark.
Cheers. Bye-bye.